Hi, friends, and welcome to the Be Who You Need to Be podcast, where we examine all aspects of our lives, such as family, career, and especially health. My name is Samantha Elizabeth, founder and coach at Samantha Elizabeth Coaching. I specialize in health coaching and helping people clean up their diets, increase their fitness, and change the way they think about themselves and the world around them so they are set on a healthier path. This community is growing, and I want you to be a part of it too. I know the year plus of COVID wasn't ideal. We've all dealt with loss of some sort. Some of us, unfortunately, have dealt with some gain. And you might be feeling self-conscious or mentally stressed to think about getting back out there or even going back into the office. Maybe as your kids are heading back to school, let me help you regain your self-confidence and mental wellness back. My 360 Wellness program will help you do all that plus more. Head on over to SamanthaElizabeth.com, click on my 360 Wellness program. You'll be glad you did. You're listening to episode 3, where I talk to the candid and charismatic Jonathen Myles. John works in finance, but in his free time, he is an improv star and teacher of the improv class, Earning Your Absurdity. How does improv help John to be who he needs to be? Let's find out. Well, I think let's go ahead and get started into episode 3, right?
Awesome.
So, welcome, Jonathen Myles. Welcome to the podcast. This is the Be Who You Need to Be podcast. Thank you so much, because I look at what you're doing online, and I certainly think that you are being who you need to be right now. So, you want to talk a little bit about like what's going on with you right now, and what you're doing?
Absolutely. Doing a lot, but I love it. Of course, I have an improv podcast called the Can't Tell Us Nothing Show. It is made up of my improv group, Can't Tell Us Nothing. That's Michi, Antoine, Tandy. Look them up. They're wonderful people if you haven't seen them or seen them perform. And we're doing that. And we explored early as COVID was hitting. We had already had it in the plans, but COVID just kind of made us jump off the boat and start swimming. And we took the leap to try to figure out, how do you do improv streaming, right? How do you stream an improv show? And we figured it out, at least to the point where we enjoy it and laugh. So we started producing that.
That's great. So you had a live improv group, and then you took it online. What was that like of taking? So where were you guys performing before, and what was the transition? How did COVID hit you guys, first of all, and then what was that transition like?
So it was really interesting. We were, I would like to say, as an improv group, we were exploring pretty interesting territories. Coming from Houston, we got to perform in some pretty big festivals. We started meeting comedians we've seen perform on TV. And now we're trying to figure out, what else do? We don't really want to move to California. But Texas, we love Texas. And Texas has a lot of people. A lot of different cultures come to Texas. Let's try to build a tour in Texas. So before COVID, we were jumping on a lot of different stages. Shout out to Hideout. Shout out to Cold Town Theater in Austin, Bear Theater in San Antonio, Dallas Comedy House, and a few others, Stomping Grounds in Dallas, those two. We just start building those relationships and doing shows and just trying to make sure the shows are better than what they expected them to be, so that we can get a call back. And we're like, okay, this is the year 2020. We're doing a tour. We're going to do a tour, everybody. And then COVID happened. And we literally, I remember we were doing a show in San Antonio and we were excited about it. But as we were getting ready to leave, my wife was just kind of like, I don't feel comfortable with you going. This was early April, early April, as things were starting to really just start shutting down for sure. But the comedy clubs, they're like renegades. So they're not really operating with everyone else until that weekend. And my group went and performed live in San Antonio, but I didn't. And when they came back that next day, everything was shut down, right? Wow. So that was how our improv live performance ended pre-COVID. We did a lot of performances at Station Theater in Houston,
Mm-hmm.
That was where we met each other, trained, got, got solidified, and then started to branch out. So we, turned to the community to see how they were doing, right? And they were kind of
Mm-hmm.
still figuring it out. So instead of not performing, we were like, we had already been doing our podcast. We would go to a little studio, we would sit in person, and we would improvise over the microphones in person.
Yeah.
Now we just needed to figure out this new technology and how to do it, but also not beat ourselves up as we're learning this new medium and testing.
Yeah.
It's just kind of seems like every day you do it, you're testing something new.
Sure.
So in that, it took about, let's say, 4 episodes in. If you go back and listen to them, I think where you can really start hearing us go from trying to figure out if we're hearing what we think we're hearing,
Yeah.
or figuring out who's going to jump in the scene, to now
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like, no, we figured it out, right?
Sure.
I know when to listen, I know how to pace myself to give people space. And it starts from an audio standpoint. It feels the same way it did when we were in person in the studio.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud and thankful for them, us sticking to it and learning it, because to me, just a little, highlight for the podcast, we were able to meet a group called the Sutton Knot. And this group is based out of Belgium.
Oh, wow.
Brussels to be exact.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they reached out to me on social media. We both were like, yeah, cool, right? And I did their show with them, which they're a duo. And that was phenomenal. I woke up on a Saturday or Sunday morning and I did a set with them. I didn't know what to expect. I looked up as much as I could, but it was kind of like, I've jammed before. Why not, right?
Yeah.
And it turned out they were really good. So,
Yeah.
of course, I invited them on our podcast, and
Nice.
we were able to build a relationship with a group from Belgium.
Good. Wonderful.
Just using the technology, the social media.
Oh, wonderful. And I'll certainly put that in the show notes as well, too, those names, so everybody can take a look at them, as well as your show too. So
Yep.
do you find, because when I looked at your podcast, and you have the same kind of format, you have video, and then you guys are also on, Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts and everything. Good. And it sounds like, when you had, usually you have like 4 or more people, it looked like, right?
Yeah.
So I can imagine, like in the beginning, it was like talking over each other. So you're talking about the pacing and everything with that. So
yes,
that's good.
Yes. As if you've done improv, it's the more people you add to it.
Yeah.
And not necessarily the funnier or more easier it looks, right? And we got to a point where, of course, we had to make sure we were good with us as a base show. Then we would add guests. Those guests would just tell us stories. Then we got comfortable with that. Then we started adding people that could improvise, kind of walking them in. And yeah, now we did a show with one of my class, some of my students. It was 4 of them. So, it was 8 people figuratively on an improv stage. And it managed to still be a very fluid, easy to follow, fun improv set.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it would not be that easy live to do that.
But
we did it, right? So, I'm pretty proud of that too.
That's great. Well, so it sounds like you're a comedy improv group. And I remember when I was exploring improv before, there was like serious improv too. It was like, it doesn't always have to be funny.
Yeah.
And I didn't always find that the fun side. Have you ever explored serious improv before?
Yes, I have. So early on, to me, I looked at improv as 2 things, right? It was kind of like acting, but it's also it's writing, right? There's 2 merged together. I didn't have an acting background. I came from stand-up, which I did for 2.5, 3 years.
Wow.
And stand-up was rough, but I think it primed me for being able to take risks as an improviser and an actor. Like, if you want to do a character bit, if the better you can act, the better you can sell it, the better return you'll get from it. And I knew that doing stand-up. So I started with improv. I started kind of learning some acting, and we did some serious dramatic acting,
Mm.
which I highly recommend, because if same rules apply in improv, if you can act really well, you can sell a character, right?
Yep.
And if you can believably play an emotion on stage, you can bring the audience into that character. It establishes some um, trust with what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a few dramatic classes early on. I haven't, developed them system, but it was enough to let me know there's a performance to this, and you have to
Yeah.
really take the serious to performance. And then when you add the comedy, you just subvert those expectations, but you're still playing a dramatic character, right?
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, I tell that to all my students. Acting is a big thing. You should learn how to play those dramatic, difficult emotions on stage. You have to,
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
So yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
So I know we're talking about the serious side, of improv too. So I understand though that at night you're kind of an improver, but during the day you do have a little bit more of a serious role. So
Yes.
how do you balance that? You have a regular 9 to 5 as well, right?
So that's a great question. The short of it is, um, I listen to a lot of music,
Hmm.
and I have a little ritual that I try to do when I am on the way home or at home, and give
Mm-hmm.
myself the time to kind of unwind,
Sure.
get into daddy mode, or
Mm-hmm.
and then I have another routine that I have to do to get into performer
Mm.
mode, right?
Yeah.
So that I play a lot of music. I listen to a lot of music. Music to me, it kind of like enhances the emotions. It makes me
Mm.
feel and process emotions a lot
Mm-hmm.
better. And there's a certain music I listen to when I'm getting ready to perform, right? And
Yeah.
I have to go into a space, excuse me. But my job works, it's in finance and software. It's not a
Mm.
very emotional nor funny
Very numbers
environment,
driven, right?
very numbers driven.
Yes.
Um, and accountants are very like dry.
Yeah.
So their humor is very dry, right?
Yeah.
But it's still there nonetheless. I always have what I call my recorder on.
Mm. Mm.
And Richard Pryor has like this thing. I think I watched his autobiography
Mm.
years ago where he said he realized as a young person that it was like his mind worked like a recorder. When he was quiet, he was soaking up everything in the room,
Mm.
all the conversations, how people were interacting with each other, how
Mm-hmm.
people, even to the point where they're like covering up their insecurities, right? You're
Yeah.
watching all of that,
Mm-hmm.
like a fly on the wall. So it never turns off for me.
Sure.
And my work kind of allows me to have some life
Mm-hmm.
where I can explore like how crazy people are in their jobs, right?
Mm.
And the diversity of those thoughts, and how their families, right? The conversations. So
Yeah.
I try to use it as not just I'm working, but I try to use it to milk, you know, possible content,
Mm-hmm.
ideas,
Mm-hmm.
conflicts that I might find in a job that I may not be able to explore there, but in art I can explore, right? Or
Mm.
comedy I can explore.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like I said, I try to give myself more leeway to record. Finance can be really difficult though, and when we
Mm-hmm.
have like big deadlines,
Yeah.
it's like I'm a robot, John, right? I'm just
Right.
like I am working, I am calculated, I am numbers driven, I am doing this. But that doesn't work in the creative space, right? It's too
Yeah.
limiting, it's too rigid. So I have to constantly find different ways to massage that, tension that I
Sure.
might have,
Mm-hmm.
and get out of it. Sometimes I wear glasses, right? Sometimes it's as simple as I put these glasses on, I'm at work.
That's your character.
This is
Yeah.
my character at work.
Yeah.
And when I'm done, I take them
Uh-huh.
off. That's me getting ready to be, it's like a
Yeah.
psychological thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great. So how do you bring your improv into maybe your day job? Like, do you see any correlation between the two? And then potentially, like, how do you bring your day job into like your calculations and everything into your improving?
Yes. So I am because I work in finance, one thing that you learn about really quick is how money is valued and how it impacts decisions and behaviors, right? So I'm like one of those artists who thinks about, okay, how does this budget work? How do I get a return of investment? Otherwise, I can't make this thing again. I can't do this thing again.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, you got children. How do you make it valuable for you to leave your children and not feel like you are, wasting your time that you have with them? So using the finance brain helps me ground my expectations on what I'm trying to do. Right. It gives me guidelines, right? Like I know this has to constantly be valuable enough that I am interested in it, but it still has to be giving me something that is worth the time that I'm taking away from my family.
Yeah.
It helps me learn how to value, let's say if you're getting booked and you're trying to do a show and, you hear a lot of artists say, hey, I should be paid. Why aren't you paying me for me being a creative?
Yeah.
And working in finance, my department specifically tells you how you spend your money, right?
Yeah. Right.
So I have to learn, I have to reconcile those two, right? How do, as an artist or filmmaker who wants to create something so free, how do you reconcile burning money if it doesn't work? And you're not validating if it's going to work, because art, there is no proof of concept. It changes by day, by the emotion. A catastrophic event could literally change the zeitgeist of how people deal with each other, and now your project is irrelevant. So it gives me guidelines, and I like them because it makes me go, this is not something we should be focusing on. We should be focusing on this.
Right.
And then inside those guidelines, I take my glasses off and I try to free in that. How improv helps me and my career. Working in business offices, when things, they're very goal oriented. There's measuring sticks everywhere. How do we increase this? How do we reduce this? You get this, what I like to call, like, let's say paralysis of analysis, right? You see it a lot, right? You see it in almost every company. And what I've learned at my job is not to focus so much on what I'm doing or the title. I have to focus on the problems we're solving, because my asset is I can come up with unbelievable amounts of ideas off of very thin pieces of information, right? That's what improvisers do, right? And not only that, but I could kind of think through those and how everybody else may approach that to help solve a problem. And so I usually get the firefighter hat in my department, because as I can break those conventional boundaries of thought and say, hey, here's how we have to do it as accountants, blah, 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 blah. And I can say, well, what if we put milk cartons on our head and that solved the problem? What would you guys say, right?
Yeah.
I never thought of that, And being improviser and a performer, it makes me a lot more confident, and my communication a lot more intentional, which is a very important thing in business, right? I need to be able to communicate in front of whoever about my idea if I think it stops the bleeding. Well, if you perform in front of an audience doing comedy and your job is to make them laugh, it's way easier than selling an idea of what you think could happen or not, right? It logically is way easier. So I'm always getting asked to do these presentations. I'm always asked to help, communicate with other leaders. I don't feel the fear that I once had, because I know one thing is for certain. I don't have to think about what I have to say. I don't have to think about if I heard you correctly. I'm listening. I'm here. I'm absorbing. I'm watching you closer than you can imagine. So any character game, high level thing you think you're doing is, like I said, it's not like me performing in front of people drunk, hoping I make them laugh. Or it's not like me listening to a scene partner when people are laughing and I'm
Mm.
trying not to forget what's going on in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, those skills, my listening, communication, and ability to be flexible and think through help me. And then finally, I think it's empathy, man. Empathy helps
Mm.
probably more than anything in my job, right? I have to look at everybody's role and kind of figure out from their perspective how much this pain really is to them, right? And if it's something that should be focused on, can we help it? I have to get those requirements from them. And that requires me sometimes not just focusing on a straight line measurement
Mm-hmm.
and getting a legitimate requirement that's for long term. So I'm empathizing with them. I have to listen to them complain about Jim and Sally. I have to sit at every seat of that table and really go, this is how this works from your point of view. And like I said, that gives me a lot of confidence, feeds my confidence, because I know it's not, I don't understand where they're coming from. I don't know what's going on. I can subvert my feelings or my judgment and sit here and extract that information as I need. And wasn't always that great, right? As you become a better improviser, you worked on a job longer, you can make those connections. But typically those were the major things that I use daily with my job that kind of cross-pollinate my improv skills, right? So yep.
That's great. So I heard you say, 3 major themes, and this probably can help out a lot of people that work in the corporate world, about getting into improv. So empathy is a huge thing. And I know that, for supervisor, even just peer to peer, of having empathy for your other coworkers. I hear all too often, that people don't understand what somebody else does, in their roles. And when I'm in an employee engagement role, in the corporate world. And so that would be something that would be helpful for people to, empathy is about getting on somebody's level and being able to, see the world through their eyes. And so a lot of times it's about understanding the other person, how they like to be communicated to, but then what are they doing? What are their challenges? And walking them through those kind of things. So I hear that. And I think that is, a great thing that you can learn from improv. I heard you also say too, presentation skills. It's just funny. I was just talking to a coworker. I'm going to be late into the office tomorrow. And so one of the things that I do is that I have this meeting that I conduct with all of the leaders, and I'm having a coworker conduct the meeting for me. And she scheduled 2 meetings with me this week to prepare for the meeting. And I'm like, it's really simple. You just go through the agenda and you prompt people, through it. And she's kind of, I don't know if I want to say she's freaking out, but she's just also feeling very kind of insecure. She's like, I've never facilitated a meeting like this. I'm like, pretty simple, like to do. But then of course, I've been doing it for many years. So when you say that, about even just facilitating or presenting, that's something that's really huge. Am I losing you? Oh, kind of skipped there a little bit. Yeah, I can hear you now.
No, I used to, I can understand where that may be, right? It's like, this is a lot. I talk all the time. I talk to people all the time.
Yeah.
But what are they expecting? How do, all those all those thoughts, right? The same thoughts you get when you're on an improv stage for the first time and someone starts saying blah, 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 blah. And you're like, I don't know when this is supposed to be funny. How am I supposed to respond?
Yeah.
I don't know how I look to these people. Do I look as crazy as I feel?
Yeah.
All of those things, those emotions, right? They come, and it's a confidence thing. I try to simplify things. It's like my golden rule, and everything I do is I start with simple. If you make it as simple as possible, and let's build from there.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with feedback or people don't like to use the word. I just say it's failure. Failure is a big part of learning how to do anything.
Right. Exactly.
It's a big part of it. And you have to have a healthy relationship with it. Otherwise it just compounds the insecurity, improv and comedy. I mean, I bombed before, right?
Yeah.
Horror story, but I'm gonna tell it because I'm not ashamed of it. I was doing stand up.
Uh-huh.
I got invited to do a show in Newport, Kentucky, which is where Funny Bone is for Cincinnati. It was right across the river. Um, it was a special event night. And it was a packed house. These people, and I don't even think it was like, I think it was like a Thursday or Wednesday. So it was like a weekday. Right?
Yeah.
Just people got off work. They want to laugh.
Yeah.
And I was working on Martin Luther King Day was coming up, and I was working on some material. And it wasn't really all that great. Maybe had one joke.
A little bit more serious.
Well, yeah. And I did them. I did the jokes, and they did not work. And this one lady, got up and booed me. And and it was like, a shock, right? It's like splashing water on you. But I responded after, the initial shock, and I just tried to like, okay, let me just make sure no one else boos. I don't want the whole crowd to boo me. But I got off stage that day. My friends were there, and someone came up after the show, even told me, she was like, yeah, I feel so bad you got booed. I didn't think you were that bad. And I'm like, thanks. Thanks for the sympathy.
Right.
But I went home, and that night I thought to myself the whole ride home, okay, I just got booed, but I'm not, it doesn't make me feel like I need to give it up.
Yeah.
It just means that, how do I make sure that doesn't happen again? What can I do to change that for the next show?
Yeah, right.
And then that night I just wrote a bunch of jokes for people that, if anybody even looked like they were going to boo, I'm like, I'm going to have jokes written so that I can throw at them and keep it going.
Right.
So it taught me things, right? It made me bolder. It made me not so afraid of rejection, going after something you've dreamed of doing your whole life. And someone says, you suck, get off the stage,
you don't want that, but that kind of gets you like a little bit of a tougher skin. So what kind of comedian would you say you are?
This is so funny you guys said. I have a hard time understanding. So I'll give you a couple of things that are my treasure sense of humor that I can tell I get my sense of humor from. So I was one of those children that was in 4th grade when South Park just came out, and and I was watching stuff. So I'm still watching South Park. What I love about South Park is extremely absurd, but it is also, every now and then they will hit you with some very, very intelligent, thought-provoking subject matter, right?
Yeah.
And, I've always been fascinated by those areas that make people uncomfortable. And it's maybe because I'm like, I secretly feel uncomfortable sometimes around individuals, but I have to deal with it. And I feel like a lot of people have their insecurities, and everyone's doing the best they can to put the mask on. Where my sense of humor is like, no, let's rip the mask off. I want to see everybody with their pimples. I want everybody has to remember how bad we can be, or how arrogant we could be, how ignorant we can be, how short-sighted we could be. So a lot of those characters are my sandbox, because all the people I don't really like being around, I spend the most time thinking about, right? Me and my friend Tandy like to say difficult people that are just difficult for their own reason. So my style usually comes from that place of, hey, like, there's fun, there's light humored things, but there are also some very interesting conflicts that just exist amongst us as human beings. And we don't really get to work those out without the conflict, escalating. But as a comedian, I can do a joke that kind of brings some levity to what people are dealing with. And I'm not looking to offend people, but what I'm looking to do kind of transitioned into my class, where it kind of sparked my Earning Your Absurdity class, is I'm looking to show people, um, and there's a quote. What's the quote? I think it's, I'll have to figure out the quote and send it to you. But the quote was, I am human, therefore nothing that humans do surprises me, right?
Yeah.
And I thought it was one of the most introspective quotes. I got to remember who it was, but in a sense, it was principle was, when I see crazy people or things that happen crazy, I first go, what would it take for me to be that way, right?
Yeah.
What could happen to me to make me respond that way?
Sure.
And when you do that kind of introspection, you know, like Carl Jung, the psychologist that studied darkness, right? The darkness of the soul, you start to find that there's a lot of things that you need to do to repair yourself, and that also exists inside you.
Yeah.
And for the rest of your life, you will be learning how to overcome or integrate it successfully as a part of you. So that was a long example, but
No.
I like to do that, right? I watch Baby Shark all day and play with my kids all day.
Yeah.
But at nighttime, you might see me doing I might be drifting into deep territory, because it's just an imagination. It's just exploring. It's just me saying, hey, I struggle with these thoughts, or I struggle with hearing about these thoughts. Let's see if comedy can find some groundedness between those parties that exist.
Yes.
In
Yeah.
that world, doesn't always happen. But I don't excuse it for, this is never something that should be made fun of. It's kind of like this. You should never make music about this, right? That's how I hear it, right? You should never make a film about that. You should never paint a picture about that. I view it all the same way. And I always say education helps with misunderstanding. If you can understand something well, you can explore it, right? I have a exercise in my class we call sympathy for the devil. It's one of my favorite exercises, but I haven't made it public for everybody because I want people to have safe controls, and I want me to be there leading. And the exercise is me doing a character interview. But the setup is, I am a lead researcher who's won maybe 30 Nobel Peace Prizes. And all that means is I have a high degree of status, and what I say is law, right?
Yeah.
And all of the people who are not being interviewed are my research PhD students, who are basically done as much research as I've done, maybe done all of my research.
Yeah.
But the point of it is, I'm going to bring a despicable person to interview, and you're going to play the character. And your only job is to justify the things that I'm throwing your way.
Yeah.
In an interesting fashion, right? So if I say, Samantha the butcher, you killed 1,000 lizards, you chopped their heads off from here to El Paso.
Oh boy.
I'll say, hey, Samantha, I found out that you turned down going to Harvard before you became Samantha the butcher. What made you turn that down, right? And it makes you think about that. It makes you go, as Samantha the butcher, what is a justifiable thing to absurdly turn down Harvard, right?
Yeah, right.
And what I learned is, kind of going back to my point of empathy, right? It's not about the thing that the bad person is doing or the victim. You want to stay away from anything that can lead to the victim. We know that doesn't make people laugh, right?
Yeah, right.
But what makes people laugh a lot of times is how the person justifies their point of view or the thing they did, right?
Right.
That's where you kind of go, well, that's ridiculous, right? And we can make fun of the point of view, not the action. So once I learned that, I started kind of teaching my students, things I like to do, right? Which is, sometimes you work a hard day, you maybe took a lot of shit from your boss.
Yeah.
And you want to explore that, right? But you don't want to do it to your boss. You want to explore the point of view. And how nasty or insensitive or arrogant that can be. And the best way to do that is by finding ways to justify why somebody would want to do that, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And if you justify it, if that's where you have your opportunity for comedy and absurdity.
Yeah.
So let's say you said, John, Harvard didn't have a program where they let me dissect the animals the way I wanted to dissect them.
So I went around and chopped all their heads off.
So I went around, right. And maybe she doesn't view it as chopped up. Maybe she viewed it as I was going around dissecting the lizards, and I found out the necks were just a little bit more weaker than I expected, right? I'm throwing these questions to get you to justify that weird thought process. And in the process, when you go out and see a crazy person, by crazy person, I mean someone who's showering out their obnoxious point of view, instead of immediately jumping to, I disagree, that person should stay as far away from me as possible, you'll start to think, I wonder how that person got there.
Right.
I wonder what the catalyst for that thought.
Sure.
And you can have a conversation based on that, right? You can ask that question.
Right.
So it's kind of one of those things where I give my students homework to go research a point of view that they do not agree with. And then when you come back, I want you to play those characters on stage, because I want you to find the place that you connect with them in a human way, right? Because the worst thing you can do is demonize a human being. And that's when you lose the connection, right?
Sure.
You lose that connection, you offend somebody on stage.
Yeah, exactly. So it's better human understanding. And we're kind of dancing around this a little bit. So you kind of introduce it, you're slipping it in there, your students, your classes, everything. So tell us a little bit more about this class. So, what is it? Where do you teach it? How can people, look into it a little further? So
Absolutely. So the class is called Earning Your Absurdity. I have Matt Besser and my group to kind of thank. Matt Besser, I listened to a lot of his podcasts, and I got a chance to actually meet him. Wow. And one of the things that he said that, of course, I would never forget. And for those who are not familiar with Matt Besser, he's one of the legendary improvisers, that's taught and been responsible for a lot of the funny comedians that we know today. One of the things that he liked about our group was that he thought we were really excellent at grounding any scene into a reality that people could really identify with.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't know what your strength is until somebody points it out. And we never would have thought, wait, you're right. We do find ways to ground things. So with that, we kind of went down the path of like, what is it to, what do students really want to do when they take improv? They want the people that want to really do it. They want to learn how to be funny, right? They want to learn how to get their sense of humor out.
Sure.
And how do I help them? What can I do to help them do that?
Yeah.
Well, I came up with the class, and the class is my way of teaching them, very simple tools and devices, whether that be learning straight versus absurdity, how to maximize your straight character so that your absurdity that's on stage is easier to understand. How do you maximize your absurd characters, so that your straight characters are easier to understand? And first and foremost, how do I know if something is going to be funny, right? And which if you're watching an improv show, it's not intuitive, right? It's not like set up punchline.
Right, exactly.
It's more of a sketch, somewhat even sometimes short film. If you asked it. So Earning Your Absurdity was basically one of my things. I said my mission, which would be for anybody who wants to take my class who loved playing funny characters, absurd characters. I wanted to make sure that you understood why those things work on the stage and introduce those devices to you in a very intentional way, so that you can, for the rest of your improv journey, now have a blueprint or a framework to approach these devices that maximize your absurdity. So sympathy for the devil, like it said, we are not only teaching how to understand what may be going through someone's head
Sure.
but we're also learning how to justify.
Mm.
Justifying is one of the best tools you can have as an absurd character. Go watch Dumb and Dumber, right?
Yeah.
Harry and Lloyd had to justify staying on that long trip to go to Aspen based on their points of views and the things they wanted and needed.
Yeah.
The justification might have been absurd, but their intentions, was pretty grounded, right? They want to help somebody.
True to
right?
their
It's
characters.
very true to their
Sure.
characters. So, it wasn't just animaniacs, right? They were human, identifiable groundedness that allowed an audience member to follow Samantha the Butcher through a 5-minute scene, right?
Yeah, right.
Otherwise, if it's too crazy, you run the risk of not connecting. And not connecting means you could possibly offend somebody. And so I walk my students through, kind of like corporate, right? Like you have a customer. In performance world, your customer is the people that show up.
Yeah.
The first question I ask in my class is, who's the most important person of your show, right?
Yeah.
Who do you not who do you focus on, but did you ever think that this group that's paying to come see you perform spend money and they could have went somewhere else?
Yeah.
You do something that's not right, you lose those people for the community, the theater. And if they're your family, try getting them to come back to another improv show, right?
Yeah.
So, I give them that up front to kind of give them the expectations of, it's comedy and it's fun, but there's work that has to be done to make sure you're giving out exactly what you think you want to give out, and you're getting the return from your the people that want to see it. You're getting a laugh, or you're getting them connected.
Yeah.
And so far, I've taught the class. We've done our second, so I did one digitally, and it was successful with Stomping Grounds in Dallas. And then I did my first live with Station Theater. And I got my third one that's coming up in August. It's sold out. So I'm like, man, maybe I should add another class.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of fun. And for the students that show up to the live class that are consistent and really take chances and really try to grow, I select a few students to jump on my podcast with my group.
That's awesome.
And they get to perform and have fun because we can't do class shows, right? We're still transitioning back from COVID.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give them something that incentivizes them to show up.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Good. And, just a plug for the Station Theater now.
Absolutely.
So that's a mutual friend of ours, right? Jessica Brown. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very close friend.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, good. So it sounds like, this class is going well. So when's the next class that you have coming up? And, is there any availability, or how do people?
So you can go on Google and search Earning Your Absurdity. And Station's course should pop up.
Okay.
They're also on Eventbrite. If you go to Eventbrite, you can sign up through there. I'm a very social person. If you are really interested or even want more information, you can message me and we can have a conversation, because to me, it's like, I look at improv kind of like martial arts, right? If you like, Station is just my dojo.
Sure.
I'm just, you can go to a lot of different places, right? Everyone has their different things that they know or specialize in. And I know, and I don't give people the thought process of, you take my class, you'll be 200% better improviser. I don't do that, right? It's you take my class, we'll learn some devices that we didn't get to do during regular classes, because you're trying to get so much information. You get to specialize in straight and absurdity and how to maximize those. So, I want you to be comfortable. I want you to be serious enough to try to take a risk, right? Sympathy for the Devil is it's a fun exercise once you get in, but there's some nerves to it, right? You don't.
Sure. Like, how do you have sympathy for the devil?
How do you do that,
a lot of
right?
people are like, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah. And so I want people to have fun, but I want them to know this is something that I intend to
Mm.
add some level of intensity so that
Mm.
you can feel the growth. You can
Yeah.
leave and go, hey, I started learning how to do side support to help a scene, to heighten the scene from the
Mm.
side, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even consider that until I took John's class. That would be a win for me, right? Just
Mm.
helping service other improvisers. You know,
Yeah.
part of my class is about how can you be the best support for
Yeah.
other
Right.
members, right?
Yeah.
Um, I have a saying that the if a scene bombs, the people on the side of the stage should
Mm.
bear a lot of the cost
Yeah.
because you weren't doing anything but watching the scene.
Yeah.
you,
Right.
you bear the load of coming up with ideas, right?
Yeah.
Not the people in there trying to swim and navigate
Mm.
through
Mm-hmm.
all those different things. A
Yeah.
lot of members, don't that doesn't resonate until we get in my class and I start going, hey, get off your phone.
Mm.
Did you hear
Mm-hmm.
what that person said?
Mm-hmm.
You didn't? Well, the scene bomb. Whose fault is it? Right?
Yeah.
Your
Right.
fault, right?
Right.
So it's really, like I said, it's service, empathy, but also letting those things
Mm-hmm.
free you
Mm-hmm.
so that you can really have fun on
Mm.
stage. You cannot be
Yeah.
thinking about what am I supposed to do? What is game? Am I supposed to stay dramatic?
Mm-hmm.
You're using your imagination with the frameworks of improv to get your creativity out, right?
Yeah. Right.
So
Right. I love that you said that too, because we're going back to the scenario of my coworker that's having to facilitate this meeting, right? And she's I don't want to say she's freaking out, but she's kind of freaking out a little bit, thinking like, okay, so I'm gonna have to go through the agenda and then I'm gonna have to make sure that I'm prompting everybody. And so if you think about like in this context, how could improv really help her? And knowing that like there could be technical issues and she's going to have to work her way through that. There could
mhm,
be times where somebody's talking over their time, and
mhm,
and she's going to have to work with that. So she's going to definitely have to have some listening skills
mhm,
involved in there. She's going to have some empathy
mhm.
skills. And it sounds like what you set up for your class, you give people a safe space to
Yeah,
practice those things in,
yeah,
and be able to listen, and also know that they're playing a supporting role no matter where they are
absolutely,
in the room. And it's the
absolutely.
same thing when you think about presenting, or
Yep,
you're in a meeting or something like that. And so
yep,
there's definitely a lot of transferable skills for people that are professionals out there that are
yeah,
looking to get more out of their shell, I suppose, is kind of
yeah,
how I'm thinking about it. But
absolutely. I took a workshop back when I first started. I always forget her name. I think her name is Holly Laurent.
mm.
Sorry, Holly, if I mispronounced her name. But she was in Six's Second City. She came to
Hmm.
Houston for
Mm.
the festival, I
Hmm.
believe, True Comedy Festival. Jessica threw, and I took the course, and I remember her energy was so dope, and I remember
Mm.
it just made me feel comfortable enough to try to do something that got the attention that made her give me feedback.
Mm.
And I remember her feedback to me was, when your inside voice, the voice that you don't want anybody here to know,
Mm.
the one that you share with your friends when you're at the lunch table, the one that you have when you're on the night calls with your friends,
Mm.
that's the voice that has the most fruits of creativity, right? It's the most
Yeah.
unedited.
Mm.
And, collaborating, sometimes there is some dilution of the creativity, but
Mm.
it it's in improv and in art space. I don't even call it dilution. I think it's more of an integration.
Mm.
And from that moment when she told me that, I focused on how do I get that voice? How do I
Mm.
feel confident
Yeah.
having that voice be the presenter when they need to be, right?
Yeah.
How do I use that to my advantage? And some people, excuse me, they shy away from
Mhm.
things they already have, right?
Mhm.
Because maybe they didn't learn how to integrate it properly. And, like you said, for presenting, I played football, and we had film where the coach would just grill you on front of everybody, right? But it doesn't really prepare you, the same way it will be to, like you said, be in a room, see yourself as a part of the team, doing a
Yeah.
specific role
Right.
that gets everybody to the destination they're supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
is a different way of viewing the job than it is to say, I got to present. I
Mm.
don't do this.
Mm-hmm.
What if they look at me? I got booger in my nose. They fire me.
Sure.
It's a different mindset, going back to that
Yeah.
perspective.
Right. Right.
And, perspectives can give you, just a change of it, right? Or someone introducing you to that
Mm.
could get more mileage back in what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, for those who are still trying to find out their strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And improv, man, it just helps you learn how to take chaos,
Mm.
how to deal with chaos, man, how to
Yeah.
deal with uncertainty.
Yeah.
Dealing with uncertainty and chaos, I feel like is a highly valuable skill,
Mm-hmm.
especially today in business as things
Mm-hmm.
are rapidly changing, disrupting. You have to know that tomorrow you can wake up and this all doesn't work. What do you do?
Mm.
If you can flexibly evolve or sit and work, collaborate with others, listening to their pain points, their obstacles, their strengths, then you're going to be burning too much energy and
Yeah.
possibly leave the company that could have been a great opportunity had
Sure.
somebody had you.
If you weren't that flexible or being able to roll with it,
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, yeah, I would definitely say improv helps you better than stand up does.
Yeah. And I gotta say that I love what you also said too, because, sometimes when you get into a situation where you're in a room full of people and it sounds like in improv, everybody's kind of on the same team, of course, they're trying to make it work. And sometimes when you get into a situation, when you're in a corporate situation, sometimes it feels like it's a little bit of a competition, and not more like teamwork. Like, we're doing this meeting together, and we're going to do an awesome job in this meeting, and some people, it doesn't seem
Mhm.
like that. When you get in, you're like, you present. And I think that's why some people get nervous, because they think like, well, if you say the wrong thing, everybody's going to make fun of me or, do
Yeah,
something. And so this kind of helps you kind of like open yourself up more, it
it
sounds
does.
like. So that's
Yep.
great.
Yep.
Well, it's wonderful. Well, good. Well, I love everything that you said. I think that is definitely you being who you need to be. And thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'll definitely
Thank
put in the
you.
show notes, where people can find you and find your class as well
Mhm.
too. And then also your podcast too. I really would
Yes,
love for people to check that out too, because it was
definitely. Definitely.
great.
And we got to get you on there as well. Anybody that loves improv and
Yes.
has something interesting to share, we bring them on. It's a fun place. It keeps me like very, keeps me in a good place,
Mm-hmm.
um, especially not being able to touch a stage and see people
Yeah.
live,
Right.
watching people watch it live and comment
Mm-hmm.
as you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's really refreshing. So, yeah, please check it out. Let us know if you like
Mm-hmm.
it. Leave us any kind of message on the board.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time of being on the podcast, and we'll certainly keep in touch.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you,
All right.
Samantha.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and don't forget to rate, review, and share with your friends. Thank you for listening. I hope that you're walking away with some ways that you can live your best life and being who you need to be. If you would like to work with me, head on over to SamanthaElizabeth.com to learn more about me and my coaching services. Until next time.